Welcome to the Mindful Table with Health Empowerment Coach Joanna Mickel and myself, Maame-Mensima Horne, Naturopathic doctor and clinical hypnotherapist, where we discuss natural approaches to health and wellness with an emphasis on being mindful. Today's episode, we will discuss health anxiety and the importance of taking health into our own hands. With increased anxiety over financial stress, food scarcity, and the cost of healthcare, finding ways to manage anxiety is essential to protect one's health and to decrease the excessive activation of the stress response. Today, we will dive deeper into health anxiety and also what we can do, strategies that we can do to manage our anxiety. So I want to welcome Joanna Mickel, our co-host. So Joanna, what would you like to share today a little bit about our topic?
Well, I guess the big thing that I see when it comes to health anxiety, a lot of times I think it really stems from the fact that we have lost what I've kind of been on a topic of having the right to take care of our health. We hear a lot of got the right to health care, but it's really you have the right to take care of your health, and that's kind of been taken away from you. Somebody else has that you feel like somebody else has control of your health when you're under a healthcare model that we have here in the US. And really, it's about giving back to you the power to take care of your health. That means you need to understand all your options and being able to understand, how do I take care of my health? How do I do that through nutrition? How do I do that through exercising and moving my body? How do I do that with stress management? How do I do that utilizing all the healthcare therapies that are out? Really, because I think a lot of times we only see Western medicine, we only see pharmaceuticals, and we only see our, medical doctors and stuff, and that they are a part of your healthcare, but we have a broader ability or practitioners that are out there. Just as Dr. Mommy is a naturopathic doctor, we also have our acupuncturists and Chinese medicine doctors. We have our doctors of chiropractic, our doctors of osteopathic medicine. And all these individuals play a role in ability to being able to give you the best health care. And a lot of times, we just see that out-of-pocket cost a lot of times because, of course, insurance models do not cover a lot of their costs. You might be able to get in some chiropractic appointments and some acupuncture in certain areas under certain policies. But a lot of times that out of pocket really can be reduced utilizing these individuals as opposed to using some of these high deductible, high what are they, insurance policies that can actually balance each other out in the long run and give you better health, because it's looking at prevention, which lowers your cost of need for health care when you know how to use it, and being able to also use health coaches. And there actually are some health coaches that can be used with your health spending accounts and your flex spending account dollars that some insurance companies are now using, and they can be very helpful in helping you to find your nutrition that you need and your fitness. So these are some ways that we can get started, because what helps you to reduce anxiety is knowing you have control. Because what usually tends to get us anxious about things is when things are out of our control and we're like, oh no, and it's spiraling. So what we want to do tonight is show you that you still have control of your health. So you still are able to take care of your health, and these are ways that you can start taking it back and start saying, hey, I've got the control of my health, and I'm going to start utilizing these tools I wasn't aware that I had at my disposal. And so that's kind of where I'd like to introduce this, and where, kind of where I see a little bit of the conversation this evening, because my goal is really to empower you, because when we're empowered, that anxiety tends to go away because the fear of the unknown goes away. And that's really what we want to do. We want to take away that scary kind of, what do I do next with things getting out of hand in our healthcare systems.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I like how you really highlight on what anxiety is. Anxiety being that fear of the unknown, things that we can't control, things that really are bothering us, that can be real, or they're perceived. They're not quite in our immediate reality. a lot of the time. And that's what makes anxiety a lot different from fear. Fear is when you actually have an actual threat that is in your environment or something that is there. And I feel like right now, especially going into November, there are a lot of people who are coming into November with anxiety, especially with cuts to the SNAP benefits, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. There is a lot of anxiety, and access to food, especially for lower income families and individuals, is going to be impacted unless something is done. And so that right now, like, I know for the last few weeks, a lot of my patients and colleagues have been sharing anxiety. You can see it all over social media as well.
Mm-hmm.
And now that anxiety may actually become a real fear, right? Because there's if SNAP is taken away, then that food insecurity becomes real. It's no longer a perceived threat; it's actually a threat to survival. And as we're talking about the healthcare system, and I was listening to you. One of the things, because I'm abroad right now, and in my first year of naturopathic school, I was in Canada. And when I'm abroad, I talk to other people, like a lot of foreigners are in Korea learning the language. So I'm surrounded by foreigners, and we talk about access to non-conventional medicine. So like whether it's acupuncture, some countries acupuncture is conventional. It's within their medical model. Like in Korea, they have two different tracks of training. But naturopathy, homeopathy, all of the other complementary and alternative medicine practices, their insurance covers. They actually can get additional insurance to cover the medicine that we do. And that is only available if you have certain insurances in the US that you may be able to have coverage for naturopathic medicine or chiropractic and sometimes acupuncture. And the reality is, having a model that does not provide access to our population to be able to utilize what is just medicine, right? Like, there are different forms of medicine, different branches of medicine. Not having access to it does create another aspect of anxiety, because most people that I talk to, they're hesitant to pay out of pocket for the services that we offer, even though, in my experience, because I didn't actually, I came to naturopathic medicine later in life, like Joanna. I was already in my 30s, and I've never paid out of pocket for healthcare. But my health was, and I was dealing with like PTSD to an extreme level. And when I got to Canada, the first thing I did was pay for a naturopathic doctor. It was expensive because, again, when you're paying a few $100s for healthcare, when you're used to like just paying like maybe 25 or whatever your copay is, then it becomes like, oh my God, like, am I wasting my resources? But for me, it changed my health and it changed my life and made me the practitioner that I am now, which is someone who is more comfortable exploring homeopathy and herbs and combining therapies, because that is how I was treated and I saw how it impacted my body. So I studied even harder, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so for you, when you're working with patients or with clients, I know that being empowered and also conversations around accessibility are major factors as to even with coaching, people wanting to work with a coach. And do you have any, like, I know from I don't know from your personal experience, but like, do you have any experience with how you made some of the sacrifices that some people, like, yeah, let's call it a sacrifice, or investments in health, in your health, that you found really consolidated this idea that, being empowered to take your health in your own hands is definitely the best way for people to go forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing for me, though, my journey to health and wellness, I kind of took them on. I never even knew about, natural medicine or anything. I just know in my 20s, I was not in the best of shape. I was in depression. I had dysmenorrhea. I think I've talked about this before. And so I went exploring on my own. And then I came upon, the blood type diet and Dr. Dadamo, who was an ND. And that was my first introduction into naturopathic. I was like, what is a naturopathic doctor? I don't know. Um, and then I started saying, oh, and I felt amazing. And I wanted to share that to the world. So as far as monetarily for me, which there is no naturopaths here in North Carolina, which is sad. There hasn't been a lot of alternative cam. I didn't even know a whole lot. I mean, you've heard about acupuncture, but it was very vague. And again, and still even today in my county, there is one naturopath now, and I think there's maybe 3 or 4 acupuncturists. So it's very, very minimal. And we're like 80,000, 75, 80,000 people. And that's all, so very little of that. So having that exposure. But one thing I've noticed in working with my clients and working with individuals, and then also working with Dr. Deb in Georgia, is what people, like you said, we want to say we're spending that, I got to spend all this money. And then when it really comes down to it, in the end, when you feel better, it changes to saying, I'm making an investment in my health. And I've seen the cost of individuals' insurance, their out of pockets and different things like that. And a lot of times when you put the two side by side, how much do you have to pay in a year versus how much you're going to pay in a year to a CAM person, a complementary and alternative medicine provider, you're sometimes going to come out cheaper with that individual than paying your deductible trying to get better under a model that only does symptomatic treatment, which is good in certain situations. Not saying we're going to bash that, and you need that, because there's going to be times you may need a high-powered antibiotic. You may need to have stitches. If you were me, like I was younger and I was always falling and getting hurt, but a lot of times we're so subclinical, you're going in and you're feeling terrible and you're paying your copay, or you're paying your deductible, and you're getting nowhere because they're like, you're fine, but you feel not so fine. And that's who end up coming over when I worked with Dr. Deb at Lake Point Wellness Center, is those individuals that were saying, you're fine. We don't have nothing for you. And so then you're like, you're spending all this money on test upon test upon test and coming back nothing, nothing, nothing. And so it's investing in something that it's a dead end road. Whereas in complementary, and this is why I'm so big on the therapeutic order and the principles of naturopathic medicine, is that we get to start working with you before there's a diagnosis that a medical doctor is going to diagnose you with. And so you can invest in your health through prevention and through support of your health through these complementary and alternative medicine providers, who's going to tell you how to use food for your health. Now, you can get a health coach and they're going to tell you how to nourish with the foods, but a naturopath or a Chinese medicine doctor is going to tell you how to use food for medicine. So you'll know how to put what you need in your refrigerator. You spoke about some soups that you use, right?
Yeah.
That you really have. I see you post about them. I got my such and such soup today to nourish blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Our food is our medicine, guys. And so if we can understand that and start shifting our gaze that way and saying, I'm investing in my health by getting somebody to tell me how to use food, not only to nourish myself, but how to heal myself, how to support myself when it's, cold and flu season. I can go and get me some. Why do we use chicken noodle soup?
Yes.
We need a better, more nutritious one than Campbell's.
Well, I mean, you should be making your own. It's like, you can get an Instapot. You can put the chicken in, and you just let it do its thing. You put the right spices in, and it does the work for you. You don't have to sit there forever. You add the noodles in at the end. They're like, with technology now, food preparation has become so much more easier. Just to have healthier options and not needing to utilize or to purchase fast, convenient foods, right? You can actually do the slow food in a very convenient way.
convenient and economical. So that's another thing,
Yes.
we think about that with food insecurity and with things coming up. We're coming into, not only flu and cold season, but it's a soup season. And
Yes.
soups are great, right? And this is the best time to make them. And you can make big pots at one time, and they're great to freeze, and they taste so much better because they seem to just taking their flavors. So guys, getting, a nice big turkey or a chicken that's got the bones in it because you want the bones in it because you're going to make bone broth
Yes.
with that thing. I guess we're going to have to put out a recipe book or some recipes online. But, I'm making my mouth water thinking about all the soups I got going on in my head. But it's actually becomes cheaper for some of your foods, and if you utilize farmers markets and some of your rice, it's a great way to add into your soup, especially some brown rice, and that's pretty big. A nice bean soup with some garbanzos and have some garlic in there and things. So you can, dried beans are not too expensive either, and they're great in soups,
Yeah.
and they give you great, especially putting rice and beans together. That's a whole protein. Putting that in a great soup,
Hmm.
warm your insides, nourish yourself.
With some
Um,
ginger.
so
Yeah.
ginger, and so these, soups can actually be a very effective or efficient, or whatever the word is we want to use,
Yes.
to lower the cost of your food bill, but nourishing yourself at the same time. And
Yeah.
so that's, one thing that I would definitely recommend for individuals is kind of start, this is where you invest in yourself. Invest in someone that's going to give you ways to empower yourself for better health, because in the long run, it might be up front, it's kind of it's kind of a little scary investment. But if you take it and budget, so that's one of the things budgeting is so important about too, because when you budget, it
Yeah.
also gives you back the power of your money. I think a lot of times we kind of got that taken out of our school system too, because there used to be a home economics class. What does home economics mean? Budgeting.
Well,
Well, that's what
budgeting, learning to make food, learning to make clothes, wood shop, learning to make
would.
things on your own and not just buy things. Yeah, the
Yeah,
consumerism really drives
it really
another
took a lot of
aspect.
right. It took things out of our hands that were in our hands that made us feel more self sufficient. And I think that's what's scary today, because things have been taken out of our hands. The knowledge has been taken out of our hands, and we're groping for it. And so this is a time where we can enlighten ourselves, where we can realize, okay, who's out there that can be my resource? And that's what we got to realize. They're resources. We put a
Yeah.
lot of the, and this is what the AMA did, and I don't mean to be mean about the AMA, but the Medical Association, is they put the doctor as the person in control of your health, and that took it from you. That's what I don't like about it, is they took your ability to take care of your health. I have this book here. I put it on another podcast. It was my aunt, her boyfriend, let me borrow this family heirloom. It's from 1905. This book.
Wow. What's it
Here,
called?
it's The Household Guide, or Domestic Cyclopedia, a practical family physician home remedies and home treatment on all diseases. This was given to households. In this book, it gave them how to eat, how to cook some nice soups, how to put stitches when you cut yourself. I don't
Wow.
recommend that one, but it was there for them in 1905, because they didn't have as quick access as we do to going to an urgent care if you got a boo-boo. I couldn't do that. I think you got trained in that.
Yes, I'm trained in minor surgery, and yeah,
I
if
couldn't do
there's a
that.
boo boo, I will help you. I guess
But
if I
it's
need to.
pretty amazing. This was education that was given to the family so that they
Mhm.
could be able to take care of themselves. They could say, "Oh, I got a cold. Oh, I got the measles." Even in here was the measles. Even tetany was in here. How do you take care of tetany? Nervousness, cancer. Oh, well, you probably should talk to a doctor about that. But but it's
I mean, I think
interesting.
having
Their take back.
co-management
Yes,
is important, right?
yeah, health. It's about
Yeah.
really, again, it's going. What I found about this doctor that wrote this book is had to be because nature cure back in that day was not different from a medical doctor, right? They didn't have a difference until the AMA that they split the education system on the doctoring. And so I could definitely tell this medical doctor had the nature cure, or, it would be considered naturopathy today in his thing, because he was, a big stickler on taking care of your health, making sure your environment was clean, you're eating, this is how you eat, these are the foods that you try to eat, how to cure a headache, using
Yeah.
hydrotherapies in here,
Yeah, so
and
it
so
sounds like it
that's
was written by someone who
yeah,
practices
yeah,
naturopathic medicine. What's
exactly.
interesting is in our one of my last herbal medicine classes, the professor went to an estate sale and he
Hmm.
found a medical bag from a physician in the early 1900s. And in the medical bag were a lot of homeopathic and herbal medicines, and these were medical doctors. So one of the things that was encouraging to me is that the way that we practice as naturopathic doctors, the way that we're still trained, is not different from how medical doctors were trained 100 years ago. And the
Yep.
reality is we are here, we are evidence that things worked because we're alive. Our parents survived and their parents survived, and that medicine has kept generations, like our population. We are here because of the medicine that we're trained in and the efficacy of helping people. Now, the question of access was still a thing because, again, having access to healthcare is where there are increases in like epidemics and things like that, and the impacts. Because even 100 years ago, there was the transition to petroleum-based pharmaceuticals, right? That's what um oh my gosh, the Rockefellers and
Rockefeller's
the
and the
yeah, the
Flexner report.
funding of conventional medicine came from essentially adding petroleum
Hmm.
to pharmaceutical drugs, and that was the drive and the split of medicine from natural therapies to more synthetic drug
Yes, it
therapy.
is.
And so when we're looking at that, we saw that people who still use natural therapies, they had higher recovery rates,
Hmm.
but the funding to market and to tell people about the successes of our medicine was limited. Now today we do thank God for like means that we can do what we're doing, like podcasts and social media. It does help with empowerment. And I will say, yeah, like a lot of people are trying to be empowered. But
Mhm.
with that, when you're not working with an expert, and when you're not working with an expert, you kind of get stuck, right? Like
Mhm.
before I became a naturopathic doctor, to me, preventing diabetes and high blood pressure and everything was like, okay, I'm going to be vegan. Well, for my body and for my constitution, that was a very, I would say it was one of the better things that I did because it taught me discipline and it showed me that I can do a lot of things. But at the same time, physiologically, my body, it wreaked havoc. It wreaked havoc on my physical body and my mental health more so than others. So for me, I found that my health susceptibility is more mental emotional. My nervous system really gets the dysfunction is in my nervous system. It's not necessarily in like, like during COVID. I got COVID one time, and it was when I started a program that required me to wear masks, and I not wore masks. And for me, like I could tell that my respiration was different, and I just didn't feel strong. And from a nature care perspective, we're talking about making sure that you're getting enough vitamin D, spending time. I mean, the whole time I was in Arizona, we were going hiking, getting fresh air, getting sunlight. And, that balance was a lot different than being indoors more most of the day and then not having access to, like, I guess, high quality natural oxygen from being outdoors, right? And so I noticed that hit to my nervous system, and then change in geography because I went to Florida, and I was more sedentary, more in my house. I felt that that had an impact, and this was probably a year into COVID. That had an impact on my body's ability to withstand, to resist the virus, right?
Mhm.
But like, I think we talked that day. You told me to put the warming socks on, and that was like it. I was like, "Oh, I have this horrible headache. I don't know what's going on." And you're like, "Why don't you put some warming socks on?" And that actually helped hydrotherapy. It helped bring, essentially you have really cold socks on your feet, and it takes the heat essentially from your head, pulls it down to your feet because your body has to warm your feet, and that improves your circulation. And so it allows your immune system to work more effectively. And this is a therapy that we use for children all the time. And it may be modified to a cold onesie, especially when there's fevers.
Mhm.
And then, especially for headaches, it's one of the therapies that I do recommend because it does help improve circulation. Because usually, headaches, there is changes in the vaso, like the blood constriction and dilation, that causes the restrictions of blood flow, and that, or it could be too much blood flow. And so these changes in the blood flow to your brain, blood circulation to your brain, is what has to be adjusted for. So putting cold socks on your feet can actually impact what's happening all the way up here. It's amazing, right?
Mhm. Yeah, you could say in Chinese medicine, it's, and a lot of times this really helps with it's called a liver yang rising or heat rising to the head. So that's why it works really well with headache fevers. And then if you're having, you feel hot and you got a headache. So yeah, it pulls the blood down to the feet. So you put those cold, wet socks on, cover them with some warm, woolly socks, and then cover yourself and go to sleep for about 30 minutes to an hour. And I can't guarantee it, but the times
It
I use
helps.
it helps a lot. Um, but there's some headaches I think I've had one or two that it didn't work because it's a different cause. But the
Different color.
majority of, you could say 9 times out of 10, a lot of
Yeah.
times those they call them magic socks or warming socks. It's a great option. And again, this is showing you ways to empower you instead of having to go get a Excedrin or my medicine or something. These are little things that used to be at our disposal for being able to take care of our health, right? Little things like this, and you were talking about having somebody to help you to know, okay, because it was the kind of the same. I mean, I tried every diet there was until I came to the blood type diet, and it really worked. Which I had that in my head from my grandfather using it, but he used it as a diet, and then of course he went off of it, and all of his medical stuff came back. Because
Yeah.
again, we were
It's
taught
not a
that we think
lifestyle.
diets are meant to be temporary.
Yeah.
No, how we eat is forever. So you
Well,
can't.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's what
Aligning with a lifestyle.
right, it's a lifestyle. And that's what's lost. Again, that education of understanding how our food is our medicine, that we don't diet and it's a temporary thing. It's how we eat healthy every single day that gives it
Or
to us. And so,
80% of the time.
yeah, 80/20, I say. Um, but I wanted to jump back on what you were saying about needing somebody to really be able to, and working with somebody with this knowledge. And, again, we're not putting that um, responsibility for your health on that person, or your right to take care of your health on that person, but being able to tell you this is your team member you need to go to. If you're trying to find your right food or your right stuff, because you get bombarded with all this stuff, and you say, oh, veganism is great, oh, vegetarianism is great, oh, what is it, carnivore diet, paleo diet. And tell me, I've worked with
And
people
even
that
blood
have
type diet.
blood type diet, right? And all these diets are being run at you, and I followed not 100% because I had to tweak that diet, and that's how I learned that diets are individualized. I start there and say this is why you and I use it also to show people why does there so much research that vegan vegetarian diets are really good, and so is the carnivore ketogenic paleo diet is so good, because you got two main groups of blood types in there. The
Mm-hmm.
vegetarian Mediterranean vegan diet, that's an AAB.
Mm-hmm.
Those blood types thrive on those diets, and they're
Mm-hmm.
50% of the population. Then you come over here, the paleo and the keto and the carnivore and whatever, and that's the O and B blood types. So they thrive on that one. That's 50% of the population. So yes, they're good. But if you're doing O and B, and you're an AAB, it's going to tear you down, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
even within that, you can still be doing some issues. And so, that's where what I like to teach, and that's why I encourage you to work with a health coach that's got, some really good knowledge in nutrition. Some of the health coach, you got to look at their educational background, because sometimes it's not a lot. And that's why really working with a naturopathic doctor in a Chinese medicine who gets a lot of the nutrition and the energetics of nutrition is really important. Again, they're going to be your resources to find your diet. um, and that's knowing how to recognize inflammation in the body that comes from foods, because we have food allergies, which we know. You're going to know
Yeah.
your food allergy. You're going to come to my office and say, I can't eat peanuts, or I can't eat blah, 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 because it causes me to break out and then my mind can't breathe. Yeah, we stay away from those. But there's things called food sensitivities, and inability to digest food because you don't have the enzymes. And these will cause inflammation in the body. And there's signs and symptoms. And a lot of times we haven't been recognized to know that. I remember when I first started the blood type diet, and I remember how I used to think I was supposed to feel after I eat. I used to think I never ate my meal until I felt like, bleh, like I ate a whole
Yeah.
cow or whatever. You feel that really heavy sensation in the stomach, and you're like, bleh. I thought that was a normal I ate dinner feeling. And if I didn't feel that way, I must have not ate. And that was wrong.
Yeah.
So, teaching people to be able to how to listen to your body for inflammation from your foods, then you can start saying, oh, this food isn't for me. Write it on your do not eat list, or this will be 20% of the time. And these are my
Yes.
80% of the time foods, because these ones make me feel really good. And I'll tell you my favorite meal that makes me feel like, woo, 1,000, well, let's say $1,000,000. And that's a steak, sweet potato, and a green salad with a nice vinaigrette. And that is my go-to meal. If you want the one that makes me feel awful, it's going to be macaroni and cheese.
Mine too.
And
My favorite food when I was a kid.
yeah, same. And now
Yeah.
it's like, oh, don't even give that to me.
Yeah.
So,
No, for
those
sure.
are the things to think about.
Yes, no, thank you for sharing that. And, I wanted to kind of transition a little bit because of
Yep.
something that when we were talking about some of the ways that we can really help people. And I wanted to actually talk about homeopathy a little bit. I don't think we spend a lot of time talking about it, but it's something, it's one of the therapies that I use that I'm trained in. And I use a lot in practice. Homeopathy is a therapy that is based off of like cures like. So, in a healthy person, if you give them a substance, it will create certain symptoms. And you can, the way that it's determined how each remedy affects someone is, again, a healthy person takes, say, phosphorus, for example. So this is medicine that's been done over a couple of 100 years. So they have records of it. And then for a lot more toxic substances, we look at um, toxicology reports to actually see how, for example, something like mercury poisoning, what does that look like in a person, right? So with that, it's like cures like, but then we're using highly diluted substances. And most of the remedies that I use, there is no measurable amount of any of the physical substance in the medicine. So if we're talking about mercury, right? With the mercury, the medicine may have been made from mercury, but it's been diluted over time, like just continuously, not even over time, continuously, sometimes to the hundredth. So, back when we're in science class and we're doing dilutions, you have 100, what is it, 100 milliliters, you put in 100 milliliters in, or you do 10 milliliters, or you do 1,000 milliliters, right? So you're diluting it over and over and over and over to where there is no actual physical substance left. So the reason why I use this medicine is, and the reason, well, there's a lot of research around it, but what we're looking at is we know that the water that we drink, it actually is polar, right? So because water is polar, that means that the electronic charges of other substances has an impact on how it works molecularly, and it can change the structure of the water. Okay, so I've given you a little bit about the science, and why I use this medicine is because I've noticed. So when I paid my first naturopathic doctor, they were really into homeopathy, And I noticed that it helped me tremendously. And even recently, I had a patient who they actually went to their conventional doctor. They had a diagnosis of bronchitis, and it was going to take a while for them to get their medication. So it was like Monday, they had to wait for Monday, and it was like Thursday night or something like that. They're like, oh, what do I do in the interim? I was like, okay, well, why don't we try this? So I recommended homeopathy, and I also use warming herbs from the Chinese medicine formularies, or the materia medica or pharmacopoeia. So I combined the Chinese medicine herbs with the homeopathics, and we were able to stop someone who was coughing. It was like a really, really horrible cough. Within a week, they had no cough, right? And so it's great because, and it was actually like no cough at all. Usually when people get sick, they're like 2 weeks later, they have that like annoying cough that I'm fine, but I'm still coughing. So they didn't have that convalescent cough. And so part of the reason why I'm talking about homeopathy is because it is easily accessible, especially the lower potencies are easily accessible. You can find them at natural health stores. You can get them delivered utilizing online means, but working one-on-one with a homeopath or naturopathic doctor who specializes in homeopathy, it is one way that I find is the one of the easiest ways to teach people how to actually learn their bodies. So when I'm working with my patients, because homeopathy is about the totality of symptoms, right? So I'm not just asking, oh, you have a cough, right? It's not just about that cough. How is this cough different? Like, what is so peculiar about this cough? And then even what other symptoms do you have? So are you constipated? Do you have more loose stools? Like, are you bloated? Because all of these specific details, do you have a headache? What side is this headache on? When you cough, is it worse when you're talking, or do you prefer to drink cold drinks, or do you want warm drinks? All of these minor details gets people thinking about, wow, okay, yes, I have this cough, but when I do this, this is what I notice. What am I craving right now? Right? Because even with the different remedies, we're looking at food cravings. It's not necessarily, oh, I'm going to go eat a lot of sweets, but I really want sweets. Or, you know what? I notice I've been eating a lot more spicy food and I'm more irritable than normal. So I'm going to give you a different remedy based off of these, we call them mental emotional characteristics. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because, again, when we're talking about becoming more empowered in our health, it's not just about, okay, yes, I can go to the farmer's market or I can go to the grocery store and I can choose foods that are better for me and that will help prevent. But what happens when you actually are unwell is the first thing that you're going to do is if you go to the conventional doctor, even if you sometimes it may not even be bacterial, and sometimes you're going to get an antibiotic. Sorry, and the reality is, and like conventional doctors would tell you that there's no real treatment, maybe fluids, and then an anti fever for viruses. There's no standard treatment for viruses, but like in my training, if somebody has certain symptoms, regardless if it's bacterial or it's viral, I'm able, or even we can go with parasites and other things, I'm able to match their symptoms as they present with a remedy that allows for them to get better. And so with that, it does empower patients to be like, okay, I have this tickle in my throat, or I have this, I'm not quite sick, but I'm feeling like I'm on the way there. Is there anything that I can do right now that can help support me so that I'm not just, more than just resting and increasing fluids? A lot of that and doing the soups, I think that usually helps me. So I actually don't use as many remedies, but I know that like for me, like if I have been around certain things and I'm noticing, okay, like my immune system has taken a bigger hit, because I have the knowledge of homeopathy, it helps me to recover quickly versus people who don't have this knowledge. they may take a little bit more time to recover. And I find that working with patients, introducing homeopathy becomes a totally different ballpark to where there is more autonomy, because it's like, oh, yes, this isn't working. And I have had a patient who did go conventional. They did have like a lot of minor procedures, but like say like they were having styes and they kept reoccurring. They kept reoccurring. But it wasn't until we gave them a remedy. One of the remedies, we have some that are like you have chronic, certain things that are chronic. So there's a remedy for chronic styes, and then getting the right potency and doing it at the right frequency, being able to help them. They actually weren't having reoccurrence. It actually stopped. And so, a lot of diseases, like for them, they go to their doctor. Their doctor said, well, I don't know why this is happening. Some people with set histories, this happens more. But the foundation of homeopathy is suppression, right? When there's a history of suppression,
Mm-hmm.
and suppression in our society starts early, like vaccines and
Mm-hmm.
taking Tylenol and taking ibuprofen, and anytime you have a fever, we're suppressing the fever. We're not allowing the body to go through the full cycle of healing. If you're emotional and you're feeling a certain type of way, like sometimes, oh, don't cry, don't cry. Oh, you're angry. Well, go to your room. I don't want to hear about it. So people are holding in their emotions. All of these things are suppression, and suppression from a homeopathic perspective is one of the roots of all disease. And it creates in homeopathy, we're looking at a distunment of the vital force, which is our body's ability, our strength, the natural innate energy that we all have, like chi or prana. So any distunement to that vital force is what we're treating through the symptoms that are presenting.
Mm-hmm.
And Joanna, I know you have had some exposure to homeopathy. Um, I what are there any things that you can share based off of your experience and like how you've seen it work or support people? Because I know
Mm-hmm.
it's not always like people's go-to or even a thought for some patients.
Yeah, it's seen a lot in the Western side as a placebo. Which the thing is about placebo, because even acupuncture has been seen as a placebo in research, because they don't understand the fullness of it, and in some ways they don't understand placebo even within of itself as a therapy. It's a treatment. You know, it's a part of healing, even in Western medicine. Without that placebo effect, some of these other medications aren't going to do a whole lot. But what I think that I've seen and I've used homeopathy for is, what I see is it's the energy that you need to get over the hill of healing. Um, when I did some reading on it before I went to naturopathic school, because I was wanting to know a little bit more about what is this homeopathic stuff, you know, it was called The Science of Homeopathy by Dr. Patolkas. He's out of Greece, and he was talking about it. And I remember being in, because I did minor in chemistry, and was talking about the activation energy. And it was
Yeah.
showing that, things happen and they get stuck, and you have to have a certain way for that interaction, or that specific chemical reaction to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
in the body, there are specific chemical reactions that have to happen, but they have to be at a certain energetic level. And so what
Mm-hmm.
it is all these symptoms is the body trying to get to that action, but there's not enough energy in the system. And so that is showing that picture that's so specific for these remedies, is that energetic level. And so when you add that energetic level to the other energetic level, it gives the activation energy to get over the hump. Because one of the things that's also is that gets missed, and why do we have side effects with medications, is they're trying to affect a chemical reaction in the body by giving a substrate, you might call it, or one of those chemicals that's missing for it. And they're forgetting about the energy that is required for it to do the right thing that they're looking for. And so they're just throwing in something, and guess what? It's going over here because the energy is not for that reaction. It's now for this one over here. Because on the chemical molecules are different, what's called functional groups. And I know I'm getting very chemistry, and probably people are like, going glassy eyed on me, but it makes me excited. And I love it. That's why I did a minor. So you can have a hydroxyl group or you can have a carbonyl group. And depending on the energy that's in the system, that other molecule can go to either one and react. And it gives a different result or a different function in the body. Those are side
Mhm.
effects, guys.
Yes.
So with
Yes.
homeopathy, we don't have the side effects because all we're doing is adding the energy the body needs to do the proper response for the body to get over the hump for healing, finishing off that inflammatory response and saying, whew. And so sometimes, and this is the part we don't like, because when you're getting over that activation energy, just think that those symptoms are going to get worse because that's it going over the hill and
Yeah.
shoop down the other side. And so we call that the healing crises. And that's why a lot of times homeopaths will say, hey, just so you know, you're probably going to feel worse before you're going to feel better. Now, not always, but a lot of times. And so we want to let people know that. And that's usually a good sign.
Yep.
We kind of go, got the right, we got the
Got the right
right.
remedy. Yes.
And so that's one of the things I've seen. Oh, I think I've shared this story before with homeopathy and Dr. Mommy. This was when we were in school, and I had what was it? I had food poisoning. I had to call her up at 11 o'clock at night. She had to come to my apartment because just I'm going dehydrated really because I'm just everything's coming out of me from the top and the bottom and it's and I'm like I need help. Somebody. She gets on her scooter in the middle of the night. She's at the door with her little kit of what do you go? Homeopathic remedies. And she starts dosing me. And thank the Lord she did, because otherwise I would have been dehydrated by morning and I was
Yeah.
fine. Probably mid morning the next day,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I mean, so when I came over, I think so again, the frequency depends on what's going
Right,
on because
exactly.
with homeopathy, what we're looking at, and I want to commend you because the activation energy is actually something that I also educate people on because a lot, like you said, a lot of people do not understand that and because of for me, I'm so grateful for my pre-medical chemistry training as well because again, because I know the science, I understand that you have to have enough energy in order to push an action in the
Mm-hmm.
right direction because our body is made up of redox reactions and then enzymatic reactions. So there are chemical reactions happening at all times. And
Mm-hmm.
again, like you said, we can get focused on, well, let me just give dopamine. But what happens in the body is if you're giving an external like drug or external amount of something that would be natural in the body stops producing. And
Yep.
so then we have deficiencies. And when we're looking at a lot of the things, like I said, you have a lot of suppression. So, like, one argument when I was reading a book before medical school was that so we putting people on SSRI, serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Mm-hmm.
Is the issue that they don't have enough serotonin because it's not being produced? Or is it because there's a biochemical issue going on in the body? But like from a naturopathic perspective, what I would do is I'm going to encourage them to increase foods like turkey that are rich in salmon, which are rich in tryptophan. And then with the tryptophan, then the body has to break it down. So making sure that their digestion is good, right? So do you have strong stomach acid? And if you don't, maybe we talk about enzymes. We want to make sure that the proteins are actually being broken down so that they can be properly utilized,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then how this goes into homeopathy, again, it goes back to our bodies are science, like the experiments that we are individualizing, they're actually happening all at the same time. And so all we need sometimes is the energy, right? Because we know we need a catalyst for this. So heat is often the catalyst for any experiment that we're doing in the lab. How do you create heat in your body? You can exercise, you
Mm-hmm.
can go into a sauna. Yeah, you can do those things. But sometimes maybe it's not necessarily that you need heat, but you actually need the right energetics that match the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that. So I thank you for explaining that because I think people get caught up in the biochemical reactions, and we forget that we are energy, we are energetic beings. We, in physics, the physics of medicine is often left out of the conventional medicine. And so when we're talking about energetic practices like um, acupuncture and homeopathy, and even like when we get into yoga, a lot of it is based off of physics and the thermodynamics, right? So thank you for explaining that. That was beautiful and very helpful and thorough. So yeah, so like now I lost my thought because I was given all, I was like, oh yes, no, you're amazing. But yeah, so with homeopathy, what I have found, and specifically, yeah, with that, it was like really dosing at the right frequency, right? Because we want to match with homeopathy, the goal, and with any medication, we're trying to match the symptoms, right? So if somebody has a high fever, instead of giving them like, so you know that there's a maximum amount of Tylenol that you can take in a 24-hour period. But with homeopathy, we don't have that same threshold of limitation, right? We're literally watching the symptom picture, which is why like I do check in very frequently with my patients. Hey, how are you doing right now? Because we want to match what's going on with the patient. So with the with the food poisoning and we did spend the day, like that day we were out, and we went out, it was like Memorial Day weekend, I think. And so it was like the beginning of the heat season. We were out having like a picnic at the
At the lake.
lake, and we just spent the whole day at the lake. And even though we had some sun shelter, the sun was bright, some we had salsa with onion, it was all the bad things. So there was a combination of dehydration and then also the food poisoning. And I brought, and this is how I practice now, I brought the homeopathy because I know with homeopathy I can stop the symptoms. And then we also hydrated you with an herb, right? And so the pair is like, this is why I practice the way I do. I pair the herbs with the homeopathy because nutrition, the nutritive component of the herbs is what I'm using, but I'm using the energetics and essentially using homeopathy like some like what emergency medicine doctor would use IVs and things like that for, or like IV antibiotics or whatever. Like we're trying to do that, and I'm like, okay, we're not doing IVs because I didn't have that training at that time, but I can use this remedy to stop your body from having this reaction. And I like to share this story. So like when people are trying to understand the side effect aspect of homeopathy, it's beautifully explained that in homeopathy, we have reactions, right? So we have an initial reaction from taking something, a substance, and then we have secondary reactions. So the initial reaction in homeopathy is to actually try and match your symptoms. So we're actually trying to stimulate and match the disease that you're actually experiencing with an artificial disease. So the initial is because we're matching this disease, we are increasing the vibration of your symptoms that you already have. So the secondary reaction is your body matching that. So your immune system is like, I can fight this fake disease. And then as a result, because of your body coming to match it from the energetic, like we said, the catalyst for the activation of the energetics of the reaction, because the body's matching that, then you have the calm. Whereas with conventional medicine, you're giving something that is supposed to make you feel better, and then after you feel better, then we're able to see the side effects because the body now is like, okay, we feel better, we don't have to fight, but now we have all this molecule, this substance that we have to actually address, right? Whereas with the homeopathics, we're matching what you already have. So, and there's no physical substance that is going to create a secondary response. So it's
Right.
kind of,
Right.
yeah. So it's,
450 and doing the excretion and the what they call pharmacodynamics and
yeah.
kinetics.
Yes, exactly. So, it is a different science altogether. And I think if you're looking for like a very logical, this A plus B equals C, you have to actually really focus more on the physics of it. And then if you want to look at some of the lab studies, but like what I love is that homeopathy has been used for so many things. They're using it for adjunctive cancer care in Europe. We use it for pediatrics. I use that a lot for pediatrics to minimize the use of antibiotics and increasing antibiotics resistance. And then we're also using it for mental emotional health. I know in India, they have mental health clinics that they specialize in using homeopathy. So there's so much research supporting it for almost everything because, again, we're matching the totality of symptoms to our best ability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely a great place to start with, again, empowering people to see, there are other ways of approaching illness or, just health in general with lower cost interventions. And yes, one little thing of homeopaths are about $8 if you go to a health food store. I have, I kind of use it constitutionally. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the ways I see homeopathy is there's a train of thought with, and even in Chinese medicine, there's some, constitutions, in Western, you would kind of say it's a person's tendencies towards certain illnesses or certain ailments. And so, usually, when you start getting sick, you'll start tending towards what they would call a homeopathic picture. And so, like for
Mm-hmm.
me, the one that I follow to is Nux vomica. And that's I call my constitutional remedy. And so when I start getting a little off, which usually starts with irritability, and I start being very crabby, and I've had my sister and a couple friends of mine says, "Have you taken your Nux vomica today?" Because usually that's where the energetics is starting to fall. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can actually utilize your constitutional remedy to kind of give your body that boost it needs so you don't end up going down the road of getting a cold or a flu or something, because it's really your body's energetics is getting dampened. Stress, which we've talked about stress and how much it can affect our health, is usually
Mm-hmm.
the thing that tends to lead us into our body's tendency towards certain types of illnesses and things, whether it be type 2 diabetes, hypertension, which for a nux vomica is probably hypertension because we're such a mean people.
But we also
But
I've used it to treat
very liver.
diabetes as well for
Yeah.
and like it's not the same picture as somebody who
Mm-mm.
may have a sluggish digestion. It's usually
Yeah.
people who have like the liver T stagnation,
Yeah.
so
Liver
their
tea.
liver is sluggish and they have a lot of emotional
Mhm.
contribution stress creating diabetes.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are different ways, that we can utilize, and there are homeopathic practitioners that help in finding the constitutional homeopathy. So you have a remedy to kind of when you feel like things are getting a little rough, but you're not really sick, you're just getting on that way, that you can utilize it by taking just one. I usually just do one dose. Sometimes I do a couple days in a row if I really am in a very stressed state, and it really does help me to get out of being, wanting to, hurt someone.
Yeah,
And I said I would do
yeah.
it. It's all in my head.
I
But
mean,
you know what I
yeah,
mean? When you get really
yeah,
irritable. Yeah. And that's the
yes,
next picture is a very irritable person. It's somebody when they get sick, you just throw them in the room and close the door and don't bother them ever again because they're a bear. And then you just peek in when they're feeling better. And then you say, "Are you okay now?" If they growl, just go away. Of course, I
yeah.
wasn't that way with it. But that's, so that's how I kind of also utilize homeopathy. And again, it's a great preventative too, when we're having, and it's a great support. And these are things that we got to think about, because when we use preventative care and we use things for support, it lowers our cost in healthcare overall over time. And knowing that we have these at our disposal and that we can utilize practitioners that use these types of approaches to health, it it really, again, I love to use the word empower because I'm a health empowerment coach, um, but really giving you tools in your tool chest. Say, I need to get me a homeopath, or I need to get a naturopath on my team for healthcare to empower me to have things in my tool chest, in my, you know, um, medicine cabinet, to where I can just run over there or say, oh, I know I have a headache. I remember my naturopath said, hey, go get you some socks, throw them on your feet, and go take a nap for 30 minutes and let the body do its thing. It's got the ability to heal. stuff like that, because it's going to be so much in the long run. You're investing so much more in your health, being able to do prevention, as opposed to waiting for you to have a diagnosis to get the health. And you're going to feel better. That's worth, you can't even put a dollar amount on that. Now, when it comes to, I might switch ourselves up a little bit. We talked about food insecurity and having, feeling like, where can I get, good nourishing foods? Because that's another problem, not just even in food security for costing, but even, you know, where do I find good nourishing foods? Because we
Yeah.
want foods to be able to be our medicine. And so we got to find ways, can we do that? How can we look into our community? Where can we find that? What kind of things can we do to lower our cost and getting good, nourishing foods? You know, one of the things I see, and I don't think it gets utilized as well as they could, is there are some community um, farms. Also, where you can do community gardens. I know at our local, two local places have community farms. Our library has a community farm where they've been growing vegetables, and then I think one of the recreation um, parks does it too. And you can go there and help to manage it, and then you have access to pretty much free vegetables and stuff as they come in. And and then you can even learn how to do some of that on your own, finding small spaces, whether you're in an apartment or you're um, in town, how you can utilize that and help you to get some healthy vegetables in season, because that's one thing that we don't do a lot of times, is eat in season, which is very
Yeah.
important too. So those are some of the things to start thinking about too, is how do we find those? And I ask you, I know you had some ideas to share on this topic, is how do we get those nourishing foods affordable and in scarce areas, where there's, not just, the what they call food deserts and stuff,
Yes,
and
yes. No, thank you for that segue. Yeah, so community gardens actually are one of the main ways that I found in my experience has helped communities that were in food deserts specifically. When I lived in Miami and then also in New York, I was exposed to community gardens, and they also reflect the foods of the community. So in Miami, one of the foods that were staple in some of the gardens was like collard greens. And then in New York, it really just depended on the area, the neighborhood, but I saw rooftop gardens.
Mhm.
And the thing with gardening is that it's kind of like the way of the past. If you have an abundance of fruits and vegetables, you can prepare and store, right? So getting back into canning and really trying to store for like the winters and in the fall, where you have less fresh vegetables, less fresh fruits, and you can still have access to what you would need throughout the year. But outside of that, especially with like changes in the past, one of the things was that SNAP matched. In farmers market, they would match for the dollar, you'll get $2 worth of spending. But with cuts to SNAP, now that becomes an issue where people who are going to farmers markets, they're no longer having access to those affordable foods, because sometimes farmers markets are more they can be more expensive depending on what you are getting. But you would have that access to fresh produce. But there are programs, so food pantries, some of them actually have fresh food, so you can get fresh foods from food pantries. And then you could also, so there are some programs. I will try and send a link, put the link in, but I was hearing about a program through some of the advocacy on Instagram, where there are farmers that instead of wasting the food, they're able to provide food and prevent food waste, and that food can go straight to lower income communities, and it's separate from the SNAP program. So I'll try and get the link to that resource so that it can be there. And then other things is actually making relationships with farmers, living in places like New York and Chicago in the Midwest, where people do seek out relationships with farmers. they're able, so sometimes you're able to maybe community buy. So say that you wanted to get like a cow, you wanted to get beef. You can work with a group. You can actually organize a group of your community, and you guys actually split the cost of having one cow or a goat or whatever the animal is, so that it becomes a lot more affordable. And then also butchers, they also do sometimes have more affordable cuts. Bones. Unless you're going to like a hipster butcher, um, like in a very hip neighborhood, bones are so cheap. And they also have extra meat on them because there's not a perfect cut. So I know when I lived in Toronto, a friend and I, we would go to the butcher and we would get bones for like really, really cheap, and then we'll make our bone broths. And then also, I like how you mentioned beans. Beans, dried beans are very affordable. And yeah, you have to soak them and then you have to cook them. But if you combine them with rice, or if you're using bone broth, you're getting bones from the bone broth, you can actually combine that. So I tend to actually put my beans in the bone broth, and then that way like I'm getting the complete nutrients instead of having to like depend on extra carbs, especially when I'm not very mobile. Now I think I shared in the past, like in a past episode, I've been eating a lot more rice because I'm very active. Like yesterday alone, I had 13,000 steps. And on average during the week, my average just in my daily like commute is around 7,000 steps. So I found that if I'm not eating more carbs, and we think about it, like I was trained like as an athlete the night before intense meet, like a basketball game or a track meet, we had a hearty pasta meal. And part of that is because the carbs, they become stored energy, right? So having extra energy through the carbs is helpful, especially if you're more active. But if you're not as active, then utilizing more fats as your source of energy would be a better balance. So trying to match what is better for you. Based off of your movement, right? But utilizing some of those resources, working with farmers directly, going to butchers, finding community. So one like being outside of the U.S., I started I started going to butchers actually because I give my cat raw food and I make her food myself because getting someone prepackaged is so expensive. And I found that, if I go to the butcher, I'm able to get a lot more meat. And then sometimes because you have a relationship here in Korea, they call it service. I get a lot of service. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so amazing. But because I'm a patron of these small businesses, through our relationship, they sometimes, if they have more, they'll give more. And sometimes they have meats that they know that they are wanting to get rid of before it goes bad. So they'll give extra. Sometimes it's free. Sometimes you're paying a little bit. It's like cheap. I'm like, oh my God, let me get that. But because you have a relationship with the individual, sometimes you'll find that you'll be able to get more for the buck through that relationship. And then working in communities, like I said, working collaboratively with other families, you can pull money like they used to do maybe 50 years ago, pulling resources, and then you can split the cost. And that makes things a lot more affordable and accessible. And you're getting fresh foods because I think that's the thing in the US that most people from other countries, like just being here in Korea, like going to the grocery store, the food is fresh. And so even though I'm not paying the same amount I would pay in the US, which is a mind boggle, some things like fruit can be very expensive because they import it, but like the meat is fresh, and like, it's fresh, and my body it's utilized differently because of it's fresh and they're not fed the same level of inflammatory foods. And so, with that, working with other people in community, working directly with farmers, and in that way, and building those relationships allows you to avoid some of the more inflammatory animals that mass farming produces.
I think it's one thing that I liked from what you were saying was that community drive, because now you're kind of moving into another area. I think that is missed a lot of times in our health and wellness is community, right? Building that, connection. We've lost a lot of connection in the way the, society has kind of driven us apart in a sense, is that, we can help each other out, especially in these times, through being able to work together and saying, hey, if we come together, we can get it a little bit cheaper, or we can create a community, little garden to where we can help each other, have sustainable foods. Like right now is a great time to start planting, your green leafies and broccoli and different things like that tend to do well in the cooler weather.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you have a greenhouse, my mom and dad just put up a greenhouse in their backyard,
Wow.
so that they can keep some plants and do some, in the spring, be able to start some seedlings early. And, we do got some, we still have some tomatoes on a tomato plant out there. It's hanging on, but this weekend, probably not going to hang on much longer. We got frost coming this weekend. So, that happens. But we got quite a bit of, I think we got acorn squash this summer. We had a big old tub of it. And so we handed it out to some friends because we couldn't eat all 50 of those.
Wow.
So, when you have so much production, you can share, and sometimes maybe, you got, I think I saw something about, it was on a video. It was a little snippet from a Jamaican individual talking about, if I got cucumbers and you've got corn, we don't need money. We just swap it.
Yeah.
And, it's, that's how you do it. Say, I'm good at growing okra because that's about the only thing I can grow. I don't really have a good green thumb. Dr. Mommy knows that. I killed boha or peppermint and learned here that it's a weed. They consider it a weed in grocery. I'm like, I killed 5 of them. I'm sorry. It made me feel really, really bad when I was in garden, because we get taught at the school I'm going to gardening, how to grow herbs. And so when I was in the class and they're like, oh, this is boha. It grows everywhere. Please weed it from over here. And I'm like, I killed a weed that grows everywhere. So,
Peppermint or mint. But you can grow okra, right? You could grow okra, which you like.
I will barter with my okra, which is a great mucilage. It's great for your gut. It has some great properties. I love the taste. I hate the slime. So I have to make it really dry. So I have to make it crunchy somehow. So either I'm air frying it till it's brown or I'm gonna bake it till it is. But it's a great medicinal food. So I'll grow that and we can swap something for it. And that's what you do. You say, okay, I'm going to grow these vegetables and I'll do these vegetables. If you're doing a community and you have a little space, you do one thing, they do another, and then you swap and you say, oh, good, we got assortment. These are things we can do. And I think we've lost, again, like I said, that's one of the things that I think that has led to a lot of our health anxiety is the losing this knowledge, because back in the day, most, like you were saying, 50 years ago, a lot of people had their little mini gardens. And so a lot of their vegetables and fruits, well, not as much fruits, but a lot of their vegetables they were able to get from their gardens. And some would do corn too. So they had some grain. Some would do a little bit of wheat or whatever. And, and there was a lot more. And the other is, I think some of the ways, I don't know if farmers, I know we did it was Dempsey's farm when we lived in Beaufort. When I was a kid, my mom would do a garden, and then we would go out to the gardens on the islands, and she would pick. You could go and pick, and that would make it cheaper for the bushel. So, finding local farms that, they can give you a little, they'll take money off of the cost by you going out and picking it yourself, because that takes a labor cost off of them as you doing the labor. So those are other ways to kind of look for food and ways to get it at a cheaper, plus it's healthier, plus you get out in the sun and get to move, and you get, you might start getting the itch to have your own garden. Someday I'll have that itch when I feel like I'm confident I can do it.
Or somebody else does the gardening and you manage it, right?
That's right.
You could, yeah.
But yeah,
Yes.
my mother and my father have a great. I don't know why I didn't get their green thumbs because they're both great. You should see their gardens and their flowers and stuff. And mine is, you should, well, yeah. But I'm not taking that away from everybody else. I'm sure you all will be wonderful gardeners for your community garden. But again, we want to empower you. And this is one of the ways to do it when we start thinking about things that we can do. And I know sometimes it sounds daunting, but at the same point, it's really it's engaging, and not only that, it's very healthy for you to be able to get out in the sun, do some just cultivating, grounding. So we think about it in other ways, that doing community gardens and doing these types of things for our health and wellness is that when you're working in the dirt, when you're working in the earth, it's a grounding. You're getting those electrons coming up from the earth that actually does, it reduces inflammation in the body. So getting out there with your hands in the dirt, hey, you can garden without your shoes on too. Really get some good grounding going on, right?
Yeah.
You
Or
know,
you could just walk in the grass a little bit and
walk in the
then
grass.
play in the dirt with
Yeah,
shoes on. I mean, everyone's preference is
everybody's
different.
preference. I know I have it's a mutual acquaintance and friend of ours. She's been doing a lot of gardening, and she's realizing that she really loves the herbal side of the medicine. Dr. Alicia McCombs, and bring her in. She has found that she really loves getting in dirt and really doing the growing and helping things to be cultivated, and so she's starting to maybe thinking about doing something in that arena. She's still you know exploring, but it's I sometimes am jealous of people that's really good with doing that ability of growing things and making beauty out of plants. I do have some begonias I've kept alive. I'm like, yay, you're living. Oh, today you're not looking so great. What do you need? I kind of like my dog. She lets me know she needs food. My
Yeah.
plants, they don't know how to speak it too often. I'm like,
Yes.
use them some telepathy. But so I do encourage individuals to look into community gardens, to look into, because again, you're getting outside in the sun, you're getting sunlight, you're getting grounding, and you're getting community. You're talking with others, interacting with others, and that is another form that's going to get into that stress management, the emotional stress, when you can
Mhm.
have community and have connection, which is one of the things I did see during the COVID shutdowns, with a lot of that disconnect that really increased anxiety, especially in
Yes,
young
yes,
people,
yes,
because of
yes,
that.
yes,
So
yes.
when we can do these things that reconnects us, that also reduces that health anxiety. And so that's another aspect. So to put on the, pros versus cons list of doing gardening, community, community is there. So I'm gonna turn it
No,
back.
I thank you for reminding us about community because when we're talking about anxiety in general, having community, I think, is one of the most important things that we can have, especially right now where our differences and, like
Mm-hmm.
these ideas of why we need to be separated, or why this group is wrong or bad, or all of that, or it's like Republican versus Democrat, all of the division, the polarization of social society and political society, when in reality, one of the things that I've learned through just my friendships in general is like, if you work from the heart, if you take the time to get to know someone, understand their stories, and you're able to, number one, have compassion if there are disagreements, and maybe there's a time where you're like, okay, let's put a pin in this, let's come back to it when we're both rational, or that kind of thing. But we're able to build relationships, and when we have relationships and community and healthy relationships, it allows for our ideas and new ideas to come out of that. And I think, especially right now and the way that times are, being able to reduce a lot of the anxiety and fear through having conversations and building new relationships with people and better understanding each other, and through community gardens and community classes, utilizing community resources, for healthcare sometimes, so there are a lot of people who would go to our schools, right? As a student, my internship year, I treated a lot of people in our community, from different economic and racial and societal, religious, all of the backgrounds were different. And we got to talk and get to know each other. And sometimes we open up doors for new possibilities, new opportunities, and new relationships, right? And so through relationships, we're able to change and evolve. And I think right now, when we're talking about our health, a lot of anxiety is coming from the external factors in the environment where we don't have control. But ways that we can take back control is actually talking to our neighbors, getting to know them, getting to know their stories. Because what often happens is like the stories in our head take over reality. And so now you may have more anxiety or more fear that impacts, like it's running in the back. So like one of my young patients, we talked recently, and she says, some of the things that are happening, they're on the back burner, but it's still on the back burner. So it's always on, right? It's like if you keep the back burner on your oven on all the time, even if it's on simmer or on the lowest setting, it's still utilizing heat and it's utilizing energy, and it's contributing to the environmental issues that may be going on. So by mitigating that, by creating those relationships, taking opportunities to get to know new people, and countering all of the fear, right? And so one of the things that I often ask myself, because like if I read the news can tell me something, or if I'm talking to people, like what, for example, when I said I wanted to come to South Korea, I would get from all these people like, "Are you sure you want to go there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to go." And so, but coming here and seeing it, and then I look around and I'm like, okay, yeah, like I noticed, oh, okay, like the first time I was overwhelmed because there were like 1,000 people in an area. It felt like 1,000 people. It's just a lot of people in one area. It's like restaurants and a lot of shopping and things like that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, there's too many people. And then the next day I was like, oh, okay, like no one's bumped into me, no one's saying anything rude, none of that. It was actually very like peaceful to know that I can be amongst a lot of people and actually have like complete calm. So like through these experiences, I recognize that the anxiety goes away, and then it's like, okay, I'm not anxious at all. I'm actually like, it's actually cool to be able to go to certain different areas and be amongst people, even though they're completely different. Sometimes I don't even speak the same language. And, there, that fear of being a foreigner. And sometimes even in the US, it's like, you know, like you have a new neighbor, you're not sure anything about them. You go and meet them, right? So that's what I think is lost, and it impacts our health because communities change, they're dynamic. And I think embracing the diversity and the newness of things allows us to actually come together and create a new system that actually is equitable for all of us and actually meets the needs of all people. Like you have your okra, I may have like some soup, and now we have okra and soup, and
We
we
got
can actually have a
gumbo.
pot. I know, right? It's gumbo. Oh my gosh. Yes, you have gumbo. And then somebody brought the rice and you really have gumbo.
Gumbo.
So it's like, you don't have gumbo if you don't have the ingredients from the people who brought, like, I think, yeah, New Orleans is a perfect example of how, like, increased diversity and different cultural influences create something beautiful like gumbo and jambalaya, and so we need more gumbo and jambalaya because sometimes I like steak too, like my steak and rice is getting boring, right?
Need some spice in your life? Put some Cajun spice in there.
Cajun spice tastes good. Yes, yeah, exactly. So yeah, and I'm really glad that we had this conversation where we were able to talk about different aspects, but this was a different format of how we usually do the podcast, and I'm really appreciative that we can, and I hope you appreciate the calm. I feel like the calm and education that we provided. We both have been going with school. And so for me, I feel like this is like a cup of Zen tea
Yeah.
that has helped to give me the energy and the social nutrients that can help me have the confidence to go into exams. And I know for you, you've been really busy with your educational training too.
Yeah, lots been going on this week. We're doing a lot of clinical observation this week, so getting to kind of get different practitioners' viewpoints with patients. So, that's one of the things that I love about these discussions, and looking forward to future ones, and maybe even having guests on, because you know I think that's a big part, again, why we want community and to interact with people, is to get other viewpoints and other ways of seeing things and finding other options. Because when we're stuck in our community, or we're stuck in isolation, and that anxiety comes because we don't know. And it's because we don't get those different viewpoints, and sometimes if we close ourselves off from fear, or people tell, oh, beware of that, or beware, it's keeping an open mind to say maybe they have something for me. I like the analogy of the five blind men around an elephant, and they're trying to explain what an elephant is, and they're arguing, and they're all right and they're all wrong, because they're explaining the piece that they can hold and touch and say, one's got a tassel, which is the tail, one's got a flap of an ear and he thinks it's just a flap, the other's got a tree trunk, somebody's got a hose and a barrel, and they're all spading, and they're right and they're wrong, because they're not coming together to say, oh, you've got this piece that connects to my piece, and so forth and so on. And so when we come together as a community and we get out there to meet new people, we can get another perspective of that elephant and start putting it together. And by doing that, that helps us to see the world a little bit more, and it can reduce that anxiety. So that's why I love these discussions. It gives, different viewpoints, because we're two different individuals, and we do have two different viewpoints, and sometimes they clash, because she's
Yeah.
taking one view and I've got the other view, and sometimes we're missing that connection, but eventually we
Yeah.
come together and go, oh, I see how it connects. And so that's why we want to share, and that's one of the reasons that we came together with the Mindful Table Talk, is because we wanted to share these perspectives with the communities, and helping others to start take another side look at that elephant. Which side have you got? You might need to check out the tail side, or the the nose side. But that's another thing that can really help reduce anxiety, like Dr. Mom was saying, is when you get to know somebody and stop with all of the stereotypes and the things that maybe the media is trying to throw off on maybe not your side of the aisle or whatever, that really just drives me nuts. But getting to say, let's have a conversation. Let's not hold on to our tail so tightly that we don't get to see the ear or the nose. you know so community is important. Being able to take back your well, it is your responsibility, but really your right to taking care of your health is building your health community, whether it be with a naturopath. Well, you should have one. I should always will say that. A naturopath,
Yeah.
a chiropractor, a acupuncturist, even your PCP, your medical doctor. You want to have them on staff for you too. All these people
Yeah.
should be on your team for your health, but you need to be
Yeah.
leading your team and
Yeah.
saying, hey, I need to know more about this. Can you help me? I need to know more about nutrition. Can you help me to know how to use nutrition for medicine, for prevention? Can you tell me how movement? Can you tell me about homeopathy? I want to know, so I have the power to take care of my health and reduce my healthcare costs.
Yes. No, thank you. And I think that's a beautiful way for us to end this episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Mindful Table, where today we talked about health anxiety. And if you have any questions, or if you wanted to share any feedback, definitely share it with us. Leave a comment, share it with your friends. And we'll be back for another episode in the next couple of weeks. Take care.
Bye bye, everyone.